All high school students have to contend with pressures on their mental health, whether it's from academic competition, neighborhood violence, a combative racial climate, or bullying on social media. At Boston Latin Academy, students took action with some help from an artist in residence, Victor Yang. It started with storytelling that led to a campaign to set aside periods of school time for wellness. To tell us about the effort are two of the student leaders, Crystal Lee and Josiah Bufford Paul. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Right. I want to start with Josiah. This campaign started when students throughout Boston were still locked into remote education for the most part. What made the students want to start a campaign like this?
During the pandemic, like change was all around us. We had to convert completely to remote, and we saw a bunch of changes to our regular school schedule that we felt like would be beneficial going back in person. Students transitioning from having a more lax schedule in remote to going back to the very rigid and kind of difficult to cope with schedule in person just wasn't something that we wanted to see after witnessing the possibilities that we saw, like after witnessing what could be during the pandemic. We wanted to put that into our regular school schedule in person, and that's just what kind of sparked that idea.
I know it sounds annoying or unpleasant or frustrating, but when did you get to the point say, this feels like I'm unwell because of this? Was there a moment for you like that?
I think that in 10th grade, there was a moment where I fell asleep on the floor doing homework for a really difficult AP biology class. I loved the class, of course, and the teacher was great. However, it was a lot of work, and I fell asleep on the floor. I woke up at 3 a.m. and had to finish the homework and still get ready for the next day, which started at 6 a.m. So it was at that moment that I kind of realized this is something that needs to be changed, and I think that's what that translated into the work that I did this year.
Crystal Lee, I have to confess, I have lost consciousness during class in a Boston exam school when I was younger. But what about your experience with stress here? What was it like?
Similar to Josiah's, sophomore year was also not the best year for me as a student. I am someone who struggles with mental health, and sophomore year was just really hard in general, and especially with like the amount of homework and work that we were receiving, and me not being able to address my own struggles and the lack of resources and supports around the school in general. It was just really hard for me to like keep up with classes and also be able to stay healthy, like mentally and physically wise.
I want to ask you about the time on schoolwork, because I think there's this almost reflexive sense that if you're working remotely, and this even goes for older people too, that you must be having more time to goof off. But in reality, did you find yourself maybe spending more time on your schoolwork when you were doing it remotely?
No, like to be completely honest, I found it way easier for me to just end up procrastinating or just end up just finding just random stuff to do instead of actually doing my work. Yeah.
Josiah, what about you? This sort of, on one hand, it's a flexibility, but it could also be a burden. I mean, did you have the same problem, the procrastination disease, maybe?
Yeah, of course. When you're in school and when you're transitioning between home and school, there's like a difference in environment that kind of helps signal things in your brain, tell you, hey, this is work time, this is playtime. But when you're remote, you're home all day. I'm in these four walls all day long. And it's really hard to flip that switch in between when I'm just watching TV versus when I'm in the middle of chemistry class or whatever class and doing work and writing essays and lab reports and all this stuff. So like I did find myself procrastinating and yeah, just like wasting a lot of time during remote learning.
Crystal, I want to ask you about how this campaign took shape, because part of the time you were working with an artist in residence, Victor Yang. Did he help in some way?
Yeah, he did. Even though the campaign is mainly student led, without the support of Victor throughout this entire campaign, honestly, I would not feel as confident about it, just because Victor was a great help. Like he offered a lot of advice and a lot of support throughout the entire way.
Josiah, a lot of what Victor does is he has the students do some storytelling. Did you do some of that? And if so, I mean, how did that lead to the campaign going forward?
So when you share your stories with a bunch of students who go to the same school as you are, in the same grade as you are, in the same space as you generally, you start to see a lot of similarities just like come up in between your stories. And a lot of them just seem to be surrounding stress in school and just issues with scheduling, like stuff like that. And I feel like Victor helped us realize that this was an issue for us. I mean, like we all were having the issues, of course, and we all share them through our storytelling, but Victor kind of helped us push that into a whole campaign idea, which like led to this really big change in our schedule.
Crystal, the object here, I guess this will take effect in the next school year, is to have a block of time for wellness. What would that be like exactly?
So during that block, it was implemented so that it will be able to provide students with just more time to attend to their own mental health and to just take a break from all the stress from school and stuff like that, and they can just like visit like the different resources that there is at school, like maybe to the therapist, to the school psychologist or something like that. It's just in general just supposed to like provide students with more support than they have right now.
Yeah. Josiah, what about having human contact too? And I know you get that in your classes in a way, in a very formulaic way, but other kinds of humans, really social contact in the school, can that help with wellness?
Yes, absolutely. A really big point that we brought up was just trying to get students connected with each other. After the pandemic, I mean, the new students come in still, like new students were coming to the school still during the pandemic, and they haven't had the opportunity to mix and mingle with their classmates. And I mean, after the year that I've been remote, I've not seen and talked to a lot of my classmates who I was once really close with. So going back into school, this type of space, this type of time will give students the opportunity to like reintegrate themselves into the school space, but also into the social structure of the school.
Crystal, what did it feel like for you after all these months of being in remote education? You come back to the building and you see people in person, you have some time to be with them. What was that like for you?
Um, I've been into the school like maybe like not even a handful of time this entire year. And it was honestly really weird for me just because I haven't seen a lot of them in so long. I've only seen their faces on Zoom and stuff like that. So I was not used to it. And I felt like because of being in remote for so long, I've distanced from a lot of people, especially like people that I was once close with. And I didn't really get the chance to like actually get to know a lot of my teachers. So it was just like me walking down the hall and me not knowing like if I should still say hi to them or not, because I didn't know if like it would be appropriate or if they would say hi to me because we didn't really know each other that well anymore. So it was just a really weird experience.
Josiah, my recollection of being an exam school student is that people frown upon it if you're spacing out in a study hall. So if you go to administrators and you say, give us a block of time for wellness, I mean, did they go for that right away, or did you really have to sell it?
So I think that a few teachers were really open to the idea. There was a really large amount of support for the idea just initially. A lot of like special needs teachers were really interested in it just because of the possibilities that it had for their students, the people that they were helping. But I think that the idea really grew because of the work that like not only we did, but as well as the teachers did, like talking to each other, just like having conversations. And that kind of spread our idea to the whole population. And I mean, like eventually everyone was convinced, well, not everyone, but majority of people were convinced that this was a good idea and this would be a positive change for BLA.
Crystal, you and Josiah are rising seniors, so I'm sure you're thinking about what happens after high school. Did this campaign at all change what you see yourself trying to do in the future?
Um, Somewhat, I guess. Like I'm me personally, I'm still not 100% sure with like what I want to do in the future yet, but I feel like being able to be a part of such an amazing campaign and working with such great people, like some part of me definitely wants to like go down the route of continuing to fight for more mental health resources for students around Boston and perhaps like the state and stuff like that. Yeah.
Josiah, what about that? I heard Crystal say students fighting for mental health. When I was a kid, that was taboo. I mean, nobody had mental health problems. You weren't supposed to have them. What is that like now that you're opening the door on this?
Yeah, so I feel like we like this is a very convenient time for mental health because I feel like a lot of conversations have been started about it already. So we kind of, well, like I think that us doing this right now just made so much sense because the conversations around mental health are starting, and because people are starting to recognize it, and it's no longer becoming as taboo, and people are saying to themselves like, "Hey, um, this thing isn't really great for my mental health, and this thing is like things like anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses are a lot less taboo now." This conversation just kind of made sense.
Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for talking about the campaign with us and taking the time.
I'd like to thank you two for having us. I mean, this was really great.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. Josiah, Bufford, Paul, and Crystal Lee from Boston Latin Academy. We'll have more news in just a moment.